If you're a parent caught in the chaos of youth sports, the pressure, the politics, the excitement, you're not alone. This is Be Valiant.
Welcome to another episode of Be Valiant. I'm your host, Todd Merkow, the CEO and founder of Valiant Sports Society. I'm glad to have you for this episode. And as I seem to say every episode now, I might as well stay consistent with it. I got another good one. And quite frankly, this one is near and dear to my heart. I haven't had a lot of conversation with our guests, so I'm really looking forward to our time we're going to spend today for you. He is been involved in soccer throughout his whole career. He has been a coach. He is currently or was director of coaching and methodology at FC Wisconsin, a youth club out of the Wisconsin area. He is the founder and president of the ECNL, Elite Clubs National League, which my daughter Sydney, if you listen to her podcast, played in for 5 years and was a fantastic experience that she loved. He's also recognized as the national leader in youth soccer development, league governance, club standards, has helped reshape the college recruiting landscape through structured showcase platforms and league-driven exposure models. Most importantly, in all of this, he is a sports parent of 4, and I think on the front end of that journey, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And he's also got a podcast with the ECNL called Breaking the Line, which I highly, highly suggest any sports parent, especially if you are in soccer, boys or girls, doesn't matter if you're in ECNL or not, there is some great insight that they are bringing to the audio world and I think video. But Christian, welcome. Thank you for being a part of Be Valiant.
I appreciate being here. Thanks for that introduction. I feel better about myself already.
Well, I had a few more points I'll be happy to throw in here, but the list is long. But yeah, you should. The big point that I left out, by the way, that I think I do want to add, Wisconsin Badger through and through. BSA degree in finance, very impressive. MBA, and if that wasn't enough, you got a law degree. So I'm happy to have you. All 3 parts of that.
I appreciate that. The funny part is I went to grad school after starting coaching, and I was so into coaching, but I couldn't find a career path for it that I decided maybe I'll go to grad school while I continued to coach and hope that things would make themselves clear over time. So there's a little asterisk next to those grad degrees.
So wait, that was for the MBA, and then you decided to keep it going and go to law school? What was the driver?
Yeah, I did them both. So law school by itself is 3 years and an MBA is 2. So if you do them together, you could get them done in 4. So that's what I did.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's cool. I listened to one of your podcasts, kind of reference back. You guys did one on the youth sports business, which I found fascinating. And I thought your take, we probably won't go too deep into it here, but I thought your take on where we are in the market, the growth of the market, what's happening with private equity. I will put it this way, sports parents, if you tune into that podcast, you are not going to hear a coach talking about business. You are going to hear this guy with all these degrees. It's very smart. You're very thoughtful in what you're talking about as far as where the youth sports market is going. So hopefully we have a little bit of time we can kind of jump in there. Let's start at the very beginning. I like to set the table, really where your sports experience came from, your youth sports experience. Tell us a little bit about it. What did you play? How were your parents involved in that? What'd that look like?
Sure. I mean, I was probably like a lot of guys. I played a lot of different sports growing up. Probably around 11 or 12, really started to get focused on soccer as my primary sport and probably my only sport by the time I was 14. Prior to that, I played a little baseball, little hockey, some basketball. My dad was my coach for many, many years when I was sort of in that 9, 10, 11, 12 age group. And then like I said, by 14, I was totally into soccer. It's all I did. I played it 12 months a year, 7 days a week. Was fortunate enough to go to the University of Wisconsin as an undergrad, where I learned firsthand how unprepared I was in some ways for college soccer at that level. Anyway, Wisconsin at that time was a top 5, top 10 Division I men's program, but learned what it really meant to compete when I was there, and was one of those guys that was very, very far on the end of the bench, but loved being there and loved competing and growing. And then I thought I was done with soccer when I finished playing undergrad and was going to move into finance, but God had other plans for me and pulled me back into it.
And that took you into coaching.
Took me into coaching. I mean, I've told the story. I was working as an undergrad at Einstein's Bagels, slicing bagels at 6 in the morning for 6.25 an hour, and somebody offered me a job coaching. And I did the math and decided that was a couple $1,000s to coach a soccer team at that time was a lot of hours of bagel slicing. So I would do that before I graduated. And I fell in love with coaching almost immediately. And it really changed what I thought I was going to do, at least with the next several years of my life. And I would have never predicted where it would have ultimately taken me.
Siblings? Did you have brothers and sisters at home, or?
I have 3 younger sisters.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, they sort of they all played soccer. They hit this sort of continuum. One of whom was a really, really talented Division I player, played a couple years at Wisconsin, earned a lot of honors, but didn't finish her career because she didn't want to. One was a player at Indiana and sort of fighting like I was to get any time. And she enjoyed that. Also didn't finish 4 years. And then one was a D3 player at DePauw University outside of Bloomington. So all 3 of us played soccer. It was our family vacations were going to play soccer tournaments around the country when we grew up.
Yeah. And so the culture at home, Dad's a coach. I'm assuming, did he coach the sisters too?
He coached everybody to a certain extent. I think by the time we were in our teens, most of us, he may have coached my youngest sister a little bit longer than that, but most of us had moved into other coaches. But yeah, he was a lawyer. He coached hockey and lacrosse, and then when we fell into soccer, he was one of those dads that said, "Well, if my kids are going to play, I better figure out what this sport is about." And I remember when I was, gosh, I don't know, it might have been 10, 11, 12. I remember he went and did his, at the time, National Soccer Coaches Association, one of their licenses, where he went down for like 5, 7 days to do one of their coaching licenses. So he really committed to learn as much as he could about the sport that he didn't grow up playing.
Yeah.
Which at the time, I didn't really appreciate what a big commitment that was.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. And then where's mom in all this at home? So what's happening with the culture inside the house with all of you guys?
Mom was the biggest fan. In fact, mom was such a big fan that she had to control herself and not put herself into where she would get too emotionally attached to the games. So she was probably the biggest fan that we had, and everybody knew mom because she was loud.
Yeah. And how'd that translate for you guys playing? Did it come home, or what kind of sports parents were they?
I think they were great sports parents. Like, I sort of go back and say, whenever I thought I played really well, my dad had a few points to bring me down to earth. And whenever I thought I was pretty poor, he had some points that made me feel better. So I don't know how intentional that was,
Yeah.
but there was no pressure on us in terms of sports. That's for sure. It was always about enjoy it, and if you're going to do it, then commit to it and work hard, because, as you know, it's a big time commitment from a family.
Yeah.
And so really the only expectation was that if we're going to do this and the family's going to commit to supporting us, then we're going to work really hard at it.
Yeah. And your transition to one sport, as we would be specialized today, but to one sport, you said occurred at 14. So you make a natural transition, having played everything else. This is the one I love. This is the one I want to keep going forward in. And you knew you were probably the best at, I'm assuming, since you're going to play at Wisconsin.
Yeah, that definitely was a sport I was the best at, and it was somewhere in that area of 8th grade to freshman year. So however old I am in that time, 13, 12, 14, which I think is really the most common time for players to start to focus or narrow their focus a little bit. I enjoyed playing a bunch of different sports, but I didn't enjoy any of them as much as I love soccer. And then obviously, as I spent more time training soccer, you get better at it. And I think one of the things people don't talk a lot about in terms of selection of sports is that you tend to select sports that you feel better about and that you're more successful at. And I was no different in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think it was a process of elimination of what actually was the most fun. And for me, the last two standing, by the way, were soccer and baseball. I went the baseball route, though. What position did you play, just out of curiosity?
I would say now, I mean, I played a lot, but I would say the one I finished in playing was as an outside midfielder.
Okay.
But in high school, I played at sweeper at the time. It was a position that really doesn't exist much anymore, but sweeper, center midfield a little bit. But I was more of an attacking player and a wide player.
Okay. So let's transition a little bit. So now you got four kids. What are the ages?
Well, we this is our birthday. We have like 5 birthdays in our house in 6 weeks. So right now I have an 8-year-old, 2 6-year-olds who are about 11 months apart. So soon, if I fast forward to 3 weeks, I'll have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
how does there's a lot there. We'll leave most of that for another episode. But what is it you guys are doing, you and your wife? I mean, as you're are you intentionally kind of thinking about the youth sports journey for them as it starts to kind of ramp up here?
Well, my wife played soccer as well. She played at Santa Clara. She was a youth national team player. I mean, she'll never be the one to tell you that, but was a really, really good player. So we both love soccer. We both took soccer as players as far as we could, and really see the value in sports, full stop, before you even talk about soccer in terms of just the lessons that you can learn and the activity and the toughness and all and the fun, the camaraderie that comes with it. So our kids are young. We obviously we were going to introduce them to sports and have them play sports. We're never going to force them to do one thing or another, but they certainly were going to play. Right now, they all play soccer, and that sort of it's interesting because they're 3 boys and the youngest is our little girl, and she turns 4 here in a couple of days actually. What she is doing as a 4-year-old compared to what my oldest, who's now 8, was doing as a 4-year-old in terms of sports is just a whole different world. And part of that is a little bit, we live in Southern California compared to Milwaukee, so the climate's a little different. But the main issue is she's just been chasing her brothers around for her whole life, and
Yeah.
so she is doing things we never would have thought about doing with our oldest. They all play soccer. They all are very different in soccer in terms of even their abilities. Their interests are all pretty high, but they also do other things. So flag football's a big sport in our house right now. They enjoy doing
Oh,
that.
awesome.
We put them in T-ball, although that didn't last that long. That was not one they wanted to go back to, but with a little bit of basketball. So, I just think there's a huge value in sports, and at these ages, especially, just having them try different things. Number one, you make friends, you learn different biomechanical movements that are helpful to be athletic.
Yeah.
It's just it's a fun time.
Yeah. If the 8-year-old came to you now, and maybe this isn't fair to say to you, but if the 8-year-old came to you now and said, Dad, I just want to play soccer, are you going to honor that, or will you keep him in other sports?
We would never force him to do a sport. And I think when you're talking about a sport like soccer, there's so much different movement in soccer that you don't have repetitive use injury risk really like you have in some sports. So we wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we'll never ask you about playing another sport. So for example, if the flag football season around here is it's pretty low key. It's 8 weeks at a time, a couple times a year. We would come back to him and say, hey, it's flag football time. Do you want to play this year? And if he said no, we might ask a couple times, but we're not going to force them to do something, because at the end of the day, and this is something I've had to face differently as a parent than you do as a coach. At the end of the day, what you really want is that they want to keep coming back,
Yeah.
right? And they want to keep playing. And anything that starts to put it into some sort of mandated behavior, I think starts to be problematic.
Yeah. What's coaching look like with your 8-year-old after all those years of coaching the way you have in the founding of ECNL and everything you've been around? What's the differences?
Yeah, I mean, and everything I've done now as a professional in the, for lack of a better word, the business side of sport, all started with my love of coaching. And this year is the first time in probably 20 years, maybe a little longer than that, that I was coaching what we call Zone One, or these under 12 and below. So it's been incredibly rewarding. It's been really difficult. I've said this on our podcast a bunch. The people who are working with 8, 9, 10-year-olds deserve an incredible amount of credit, because it is such a difficult group in terms of the age and the maturity level and the range of maturity that you can have from one kid to another. But there's so much joy and emotion and energy as well with them. So it's been a really good learning curve for me. It's the old phrase, if you think you know something, try and teach it. And when you try and teach the very, very basics and foundations of the sport, in terms of even things like how to recognize a 2v1, it's different talking to a 8-year-old about that than it is talking to a 15-year-old about something that might be more functional or tactical in a 2v1. Just teaching them where to look and when to look and why to look and all that stuff. You learn a lot. And then also recognizing how do you make it fun. And nothing will stretch your thoughts on planning a training more than the attention span of an 8-year-old boy.
So what? Yeah, if I coached at any point in my girls' lives, it was at that really young age, and it always makes me laugh to think about that one kid. There's the scrum on the ball, and there's one kid watching the bird overhead fly by. Right? It's like, okay, but they're having fun. What is the one great moment you've had so far in coaching your kids? Is there one?
That's actually an easy answer, because we just had it, and we played a tournament here at the end of the year on Coronado Island, which I'm sure you've been to.
Yep.
Which right before Christmas on Coronado, there's not very many more beautiful places you could be in the U.S. And it was the first tournament that they ever won. And I say that because it was the end of the season. It was a group that has worked really hard. And listen, they're eight, so this is not anything high profile or anything. I'm not saying anything like that. But to see the joy and excitement of a group of boys, and with 8-year-old boys, everything's the World Cup final.
Yeah.
Every game is so exciting. Every goal is emotion. It's actually really, really cool. But for them to have finished a year with their first ever win, and I see my son, I got a photo of him with his medal on, which he wore for like 5 straight days, just
Oh,
around the
that's
house and
awesome.
everywhere else. It was just one of those things. I said, you just don't get this very often in sports, where a season ends on such a high positive note, on something that's not happened before, because they didn't have a lot of success
Yeah.
a year before. So it was cool.
Well, that's cool. Well, let's transition more into just your whole coaching career and, kind of lay that out a little bit, your philosophy that you established over the years and what, FC Wisconsin leaned on with you for so long, and what that meant not only to the players that you coached, but, what was the relationship like and your philosophy like with managing parents and, inside of that coaching environment?
I think that's a moving target, probably, if you
Yeah.
look at my career. And like anything, I've made plenty of mistakes and learned from things. I think even when you talk about the relationship with parents, I've probably been across the whole continuum, um, as I've matured or grown or learned. I mean, right now, I would say that if you're not engaging the parents and helping them understand what to look for and how to interpret things, you're making a big mistake, because they're a huge part of the development process. And I think the younger they are, the more that's true, but it's still very true, I think, with when you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds who are looking to go to college. And if you don't give parents things to measure success by, things to look for, and explanations of why you do certain things, or why games go certain ways, you're just leaving things up to chance. So I think I'm very supportive and encouraging of engagement with parents. From a coaching philosophy perspective, I guess if I had to summarize what it is, I've always worked to gear my coaching towards the top players in the team or in the group, with the philosophy that if you coach to the top, the rest will get pulled along with it. And if you coach to the bottom, you're doing a disservice. And if you coach to the middle, you're kind of not really hitting anybody. So I've always tried to set an environment that demands a lot, that in terms of concentration and work, that tries to find the fun out of competing and learning and doing that in a group collective environment. So I've sort of distinguished between, a recess, for example, if we're talking about younger kids, recess and a fun classroom environment. I've wanted to match those two, of have competitiveness, and a very, very information rich environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so take us. I'm just kind of skimming your coaching career, but to get to the ECNL with everything that you're doing on a coaching side, I don't know if I've ever heard the story of how ECNL came to be, why you launched it, but how does that evolve out of what you're doing at FC Wisconsin and building the league?
So when we started the league in '09, I and most people coaching youth soccer at that time were coaching both boys and girls, and that's an important difference to what you see today, where generally people are coaching one gender predominantly. But I say that because in 2007, U.S. Soccer started the Development Academy, which was an attempt to improve the youth environment for boys. And I coached in that for many years. And again, because I and many of us were coaching on both sides, we saw similar challenges and needs on the girls' side, in terms of improving the average quality of game, providing more opportunity for training, getting the best to play each other more often. And those were probably the biggest drivers of that. And so we were sitting in 2009, actually, at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and said, we need to do something here. Nobody else was going to do it. U.S. Soccer wasn't interested in doing anything on the girls' side. And so we looked around at each other and said, well, why don't we do something? And it was a we. Several people and I put together a business plan, a 5-year plan at the time, and said, well, let's see if we can sell this to a group of clubs as something that would be good for them. And I wish we could claim we had the vision to get to where we are today, but we absolutely did not. By the grace of God, we are where we are. But we did lay out a 5-year plan of a way to improve the youth female environment, and we were off and running. So it came out of the change that the federation created on the boys' side, and then the lack of any entity that wanted to do something similar on the girls' side, and we said, let's just do it ourselves.
And what challenge? This is during the time that Sydney's playing. Probably, what launch? What was your launch year? '09.
'09. Yep.
Yeah. So she came into it probably in 14, I would think, somewhere 14 or 15 was her first ECNL year. So I saw the reaction, but what were your challenges when U.S. Soccer then decided, oh, well, maybe we should do a girls' thing?
Two. One is I would never like to go back through that experience again, because it was really stressful and really difficult. But two, to be honest, if that didn't happen, I don't think we would have really looked inside and determined to take this to where we have. That moment forced us to really reconsider, what are we doing, what do we believe in, and how much do we believe in it? Are we willing to fight for it? And we did. And so with that forced sort of a reanalysis of everything from purpose and vision to what else can we do. So in many ways, it supports the power and importance of competition, because prior to that, to be honest, if you talked to us in 2015, we would say, yeah, we're the best youth league in the country. We got most of the best clubs, and yeah, it's great. And we didn't have a big ambition and a big vision and a big mission. And that woke us up really quickly, because standing up and saying, hey, we're not gonna support the Federation Girls Development Academy, or at least we're not gonna just roll over and say, hey, We're not going to offer a competing platform. That was something that many, many people told us not to do, told us we were not very intelligent to try and do. But we just believed that what we stood for and what we were doing was going to be a better thing for the player.
Well, you may not say it, but as a parent at the time, I will say that it was an amazing experience to watch my daughter go through the national platform tournaments in particular and showcases, and what the ECNL direct connection was to all of those girls that were on soccer fields at the national events or the regional events. Obviously, the clubs, when it goes down into the clubs, it gets a little further away from ECNL's control. But what I'm referring to is branding, is positioning of the league, what the value proposition visually means to the players and also to the parents, by the way. I thought you guys did a tremendous job of making the parents and the families, more importantly, the families feel valuable. But to watch the girls, and one thing stands out, and I got a photo that'll pop up every once in a while. I think it was from the playoffs in Chicago one year in 18 or 17. And it's all the graphics of you guys screaming, amazing young women. It gives me chills just thinking about it, to be honest with you, because, you know, despite what any other organization thought they could do, what they wanted to do, you know, I was very vocal as a sports parent at what the ECNL meant to these kids, and that there is no way that this organization should be pushed aside, should not be part of what this ecosystem is about, because in my observation, you guys were doing everything right for the betterment of what those girls were doing on the field. And it wasn't necessarily about what the end game was. I mean, what we were communicated to by the person who was running the club we were at the time, Joe Owen, who has been brought up on this podcast before by Sydney. Fantastic guy, fantastic leader. He was all about the alignment of putting the club in direct alignment to what ECNL was doing. And as it was explained at the time, ECNL's goal is to get you to the next level, whatever that level is. It's not Division I or nothing. It's not Division II or nothing. It's not national team or nothing. It's where do you want to go? We're going to help you get there. And Joe, from a club level, I would think this is something that you'd always want as an extension of what the ECNL brand is. You know, Joe aligned that with the idea of we want to find out what your daughter wants to do in life. What does she want to study, and find the best schools that will match up both from a playing perspective and so on. I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I just thought what you guys became so quickly was unreal. And I can totally understand how you've gotten to where you are today because of staying that vision, creating that vision, and thank God you stayed the path.
Well, I appreciate that. And that amazing young women tagline, that was the brainchild of Sarah Kate Knopfsinger, who was our first commissioner, who's gone on to have an incredible career. She's at Atlanta United now. She's been in MLS and at Adidas and all over the place since moving on from the ECNL. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because one of the driving principles behind starting the league was to create an environment that inspired players, where when they showed up, they felt different. It looked different. The atmosphere was different, because our thought was that if we can create that type of environment, we'll inspire players to go home and work harder and dream bigger and be better. And that is how we would move the quality of play forward. Today, we say that through our mission to provide the best youth sports experience in the world. We probably couldn't have articulated it that well back in 2014. But that mission, it is everything that you said, on including the parent piece, because when parents and siblings come to our events now, we want them to enjoy it and to want to hang out longer and look at this as a family memory of soccer for sure, but of a family memory of a great experience. And if you have great experiences that inspire players to be better, they're going to go wherever their talent and work rate takes them. And, you know, we say this all the time. It's one of our core values as well, that leagues don't develop soccer players. Players develop players and clubs develop players. And so our role is very clear, which is to support those players in their dreams, and that they will take and they should get all the credit for wherever that takes them, whether that's a national team or whether that's a Division III college, or whether it's an unbelievable sporting experience that creates a fan for life. All of those things are valuable in moving the sport forward.
Yeah. And so when you talk about that, talk a little bit about the structure of the league. So as you bring clubs in or invite clubs in, what are the qualifications of those clubs? Is there any way that with what you are building from top down, is there any way that culture, that experience, that expectation that you have, is there any way that is put into the clubs? I'm guessing not, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how clubs get into ECNL.
Well, when we started, in '09, as you mentioned, we were just 40 clubs in three girls age groups, under 15, 16, and 17. So I'm not sure how many players that is, maybe 2,000 players, something like that. Today, we're about 120, 130,000 players with both genders. Obviously, we have programming that goes down U13 to U18 everywhere, but we go down to U10 in some places in a very different type of structure. And so there's been a huge amount of an expansion of bringing clubs into our platform. And, we've done that. And I'll say one of the things I say about expansion is we want people who want to be a part of the league first and foremost because they're aligned with our mission and our values. And the second reason we want them to be a part of the league is because we provide the best youth sports experience. But the order is intentional. We want clubs and leaders that are aligned with what we want to do and the way we look at sport and the power of sport. Now, to your point, we don't operate these clubs. We don't hire the coaches at these clubs. We don't supervise the daily training environment. That's not our role. Our role is to provide opportunity, to provide resources, to provide incentives, all that sort of stuff. But we are very clear, as much as we can be, on setting out what we believe in and why we believe in it and what we believe the league should stand for. And again, there's a wide variety of ways to coach and ways to operate a club. And generally everybody's going to be in a space of, hey, it's all okay. It's like coaches. Some are louder than others, and there's not a right or wrong in that. There are lines at which it is inappropriate. But our job is to provide the best possible experience, articulate why we believe that our vision and our values are things that should be celebrated by the clubs and embraced by the clubs. And over time, I would like to think that more and more of them believe in those things because they see them as true as well. But every club is going to be different in how they operate.
With everything that you guys do, and since Sydney has been in the league, which is now going on, I think we're 6 years removed, I've noticed there are a lot of resources on your site. We briefly talked about the podcast, which I think is awesome, Breaking the Line. There's a lot of resource information at theecnl.com. What are you guys doing to hopefully try to keep everything in that pathway within the guardrails, I guess? Is there coach education? Is there organization education? What is it that you guys are doing?
Well, that's one of the really cool things about the last 5-6 years is as we've reached a certain size and scale, which gives with it resources, and as we've kind of gotten out of too many of the conflicts that existed back when like the Development Academy was created, we've been able to really focus on other platforms that we can add to competition. And so, it's part of the values we have in the league that anybody can do a gaming circuit or a league. A great league needs to provide additional resources and services. So about 2.5 years ago, we launched the ECNL Coach Education Center, which is a partnership with the Coach's Voice out of England, which is one of the best digital coaching education platforms in the world. And we right now require every coach in the league to do 5 hours of annual coach education online. And we're to our knowledge, the only organization in the country that requires any type of ongoing annual coach education, which is important because we said if we're going to say we're going to be the best league in the world, we have to expect coaches to have ongoing coach education. And so we have to match up our statement with our actions. But the really powerful thing about that is every year we get to pick what we want those 5 hours to contain in terms of content. So if there's an area that we feel is really important, whether it's something about mental health or whether it's something more basically technical or tactical, we can put that into the content that I think over the last couple of years, we've got more than 50,000 hours of coach education that's been consumed by coaches in the league. So that was started 2.5 years ago or so. About a year ago, we also launched something called the ECNL Center for Athlete Health and Performance. And we've done that with our sports medicine advisor, Dr. Drew Watson, who's with the University of Wisconsin Sports Medicine program, and he's a sports medicine pediatrician. And what that platform is designed to do is number one, do some original research within the league using all the resources and the scale that we have, which is pretty rare in youth sports. There's a lot, as we've learned in talking to Dr. Watson, there's a lot of data and information about adults and adult sports, but there's not a lot about youth. And so we've been able to use our network of clubs and all the games and all the events we do and the data that's collected from them to do some really groundbreaking research that will hopefully change youth sports well beyond just the league, and then disseminate other research in sports or kids that we can turn into something that is understandable, applicable, and reach the parent, the coach, the player, and things that impact player health and performance. So, for example, Dr. Watson just published a study, I'm going to say a couple months ago, dealing with like depression and anxiety in kids, and examining what are the biggest impacts on that. And I've used this in a couple of our last presentations because I think it's so incredibly powerful that the difference between 5 hours of sleep a night and 8 hours of sleep a night is a huge amount of anxiety and depression in kids. And so when you talk about something like mental health that people, put a lot of focus and resources in over time, and you say, what is one thing that you can do to improve the odds that your child does not suffer from anxiety or depression as much? Improve the sleep hours every night. And that's data-driven, research-driven stuff. And there's a lot more of that he's done and is continuing to do. But that's a really, I think, unique thing that we're able to do with the league now is use the scale that we have, the size that we have, and do things that nobody else has really tried to do, whether that's annual coach education on specific topics or whether it's research that we can use to change trajectories of kids. We're committed to doing it.
Yeah, I highly commend you. I've got the report that you were just talking about, one of them. Parents, if you're listening, we will have links to this in the episode details below or on our site. But this is fantastic. There are a number of different reports, infographics that the league has put up, all on different various issues from mental health to impact of injuries. I highly commend you. Christian, I got to tell you, one of the greatest frustrations for me, and really one of the reasons why I created Valiant Sports Society, was because as a parent, and a parent that I thought, to be honest, I thought I was equipped. Sydney in particular went through a lot of different adversity moments, and some of them were health related, and one of them pertained to her breathing when she was on the soccer field. We could not figure it out. It looked like asthma. It wasn't asthma. Doctors thought it was allergies and trees, and it turned out to be vocal cord dysfunction, which
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, which is something that is driven by anxiety, which was coming from the sidelines in a lot of different ways. But the point of what I'm making here is I could not find information. And parents, for those of you that are soccer parents in particular that are listening to this episode, go to the ECNL site. Whether you are a member of the organization or not, there's a lot of good information for your soccer player, and hopefully you become a player inside of the ECNL, boys or girls. And if you don't play soccer, sports parents, I would still recommend look at different organizations, and the ECNL is a really good example of a place for resources and information on what is working, what is being done really, really well. So I highly commend you on that in all regards. The coaching part is fantastic as well. Let's talk about You often talk about the three pillars or three constituents. I've heard you mention this a few times in the podcast itself: the players, the coaches, the parents. You've talked a little bit about the coaches. Talk about, from an ECNL perspective, from your perspective, maybe Park coach, but ECNL perspective, what is the expectation for the players, and what is the expectation for the parents?
That's a tough one because, as we've said, we're a step removed from the day to day. We don't hire the coaches, we don't operate the clubs. We provide events, which are really our highest touch point. We sanction, or well, actually, we don't even sanction. We operate the regular season competition, and then we have a big presence in socials, right? Which is probably the most frequent way that we can influence and impact people. I'll give you one example. Last year we identified that there's too many red cards, for example, that are related to bad behavior. So this isn't denial of a goal scoring opportunity. This is somebody says something that they shouldn't, or somebody lashes out and does something violent that they shouldn't. And we launched the campaign "Red is not your color" as kind of a cheeky way to talk about negative behaviors in the game and to cut them out. And so we launched a video associated with that, a pledge associated with that, some captain's armbands that we put out on players and promote, with the intention of reducing whether it's discriminatory language or behavior, or reducing emotional outbursts and reaction verbally or physically. So we do things like that are designed to be behavioral change type things. The reality, as Cynic can point out, is that the people that probably need that stuff the most are not exactly the ones that probably listen to it.
Yeah.
But it is an attempt.
Yeah.
And then we have a very good partnership with US Club Soccer, who is our sanctioning body, and they have invested significantly in an entire safeguarding department. When you talk about real extreme things and things that have no place in the sport, when it comes to the player and the parent and just general day to day, we've tried to, if I guess, and it's an interesting question because I'm not sure I've been asked it before, but we try and create an aspirational environment that encourages them to bring the best by celebration of success, celebration of competition, celebration of teamwork, that type of thing. But it is hard because we do also recognize that we need to work through the coaches and the directors if we're reaching the parent and player on a regular basis.
Yeah. Needless to say, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot within these tournaments and the showcases and league play. And we're not even talking about you as a coach necessarily, just as an ECNL founder and being around it. What are some of the things on the sidelines that just, make you shake your head, and if you could wave your wand, change right away?
And again, I don't want to be the one who pretends to be holier than thou, because we've all, as parents or players or whatever, or coaches, we've all, anyone who says they haven't had a moment where they've done something they say, I probably shouldn't have said that, or whatever, is not being honest, I think. But I think number one, the easy one to point out, is the attacks on referees. Referees are an important part of the game. Referees make mistakes just like players and coaches do. I think there's a lot of unnecessary criticism of referees. It's very, very rare that a referee mistake actually changes the outcome of the game. Somebody's going to point some scenario out where that's not the case. But in general, I would say, when I see people screaming at referees on the sideline because of a missed call or a throw in or something like that, I just kind of shake my head. From a coaching perspective, I think really good coaching can help players in the moment, but not by joysticking them. So, for example, I try and have a rule with coaches I work with not to coach the player on the ball, because if you start yelling or telling the player on the ball things to do, you totally derail the player's thinking and learning process. So we talk about, if you're gonna coach in the moment, to coach players off of the ball about where they could move, or give comments that encourage thinking, not are prescriptive in direction, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if that addresses the total intent of your question, but I think if people take a step back and recognize it's youth sport, it's designed for fun first and foremost. And yes, it's really good for it to get competitive, and it's really good for emotion to be a part of sport, because I think emotion is a really important part of sport. And one of the skills of an athlete is learning how to manage emotion, especially as they get older and pressure builds and expectations and aspirations build. But I think we all could do with taking 10 seconds of a breath when people feel a little bit of frustration that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine everything that you've seen. Let me shift gears a little bit on you. And, I hear you loud and clear that the players are, they're really the club's focus, right? But because ECNL has such a very large brand presence, and because, especially as you've stated in the last 5 years, the things that you were doing, talk a little bit about, the shift that we're seeing with mental health. I mean, you guys are rooted in the female soccer player in particular, where, I've experienced this firsthand with my own daughter, not because of anything with the ECNL. It was coach related in different variables. But nonetheless, you see these athletes, there's an environment that they're in with their clubs and their organizations when they come to the ECNL events and so on. But just in general, what are you seeing with, athletes and mental health these days, on this level?
I think the environment itself is actually improved over the last couple of years. And, there's always going to be exceptions. You're never in a perfect scenario. But I think if you were to look at the average sideline now compared to 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you do see, at least in our league, you do see more calmness than maybe you did 10 years ago. Now, again, there's always going to be issues, and I think it's something you're never done with, in terms of talking about what is the right environment, whether that's from a parent on the sideline or a way a coach is speaking. When we talk about coaching as well, one of the pieces of advice I was given by a mentor was, if you're going to make a coaching point, the first question should be, is this for your benefit or for theirs? And so I think a constant recognition of the job of a coach is to support the player on their journey. And, if you want to get really overly academic about it, I mean, the derivation of the word coach is to help somebody get somewhere. Right. And so I think if you keep that first in your mind, that my job is to help this player get where they want to go and hopefully get there faster than they could on their own. I'm not the captain of the ship. I'm not the one setting the direction. I'm the one that is supporting the player as they choose the direction. And ultimately, they're going to choose how fast they're going to move in that direction to some degree. And they're going to be different within that. And some players want to be pushed in different ways and pushed harder than others. That's a challenge of coaching, especially when you're in a team sport, of balancing those different desires. And as is probably as old as time, some kids respond differently to different coaches, and where those things are just personality differences, that's okay. Where there are things that get into lines that are more problematic, then we need to talk about that. But to me, I think you start with, where is the athlete? Where do they want to go? And how do I help them get there in a way that is aligned with what they want and what their family wants? And generally, you're going to be in a good spot.
Yeah. And you talked about this earlier when you were talking about communication with your own coaching style, communication with the parent, and how important that is. Is that something of a philosophy that you try to get member clubs to participate in to be more proactive, to have parents involved. And when we bring this back to mental health in particular, it's almost a collaboration. It's teamwork, right? There can be something happening on the field that you don't know as a parent that a coach obviously can identify with, and vice versa. There could be things happening at home that the coach isn't seeing from time to time, but something is not right. And the collaboration, and there's my point is, there can be too many coaches out there. Not everybody's this way, clearly, but there are a lot of coaches out there who, when the parent approaches, say, "Hey, no, we don't need to have a conversation. I'm good. Like I'm the coach and you're the parent." So, from the standpoint of what you guys are encouraging, is that in line with like your philosophy?
Absolutely. I think there's always emotion around game day, and most clubs have some sort of, hey, let's not talk about playing time or position around game day. And that makes a ton of sense, because everybody, and it's true in so many different areas of life, that upon reflection, everybody's a little calmer, all right, and sees things maybe they wouldn't in the moment. But generally, Dr. Watson puts it this way, because we've put some of our annual coach education has been dedicated and targeted towards how do you support player mental health. That mental health is the same in physical health, in the sense that sometimes you just ask a question. If a player is limping around the field, a coach would say, "Hey, what's going on? Are you hurt?" And when you see things that maybe more emotional, or somebody just seems down, or they seem not in a good headspace, the same question needs to be asked of, "Hey, are you okay?" And normalizing that type of question is a really positive thing, and at least getting a player to have the chance to open up and tell you something that's going on. And I think, again, over time, we've made almost every mistake in the book. I think if you're a parent or a coach long enough, you probably can say that. But the amount of times that your opinion of what is happening is different after you ask the question, instead of assuming the answer, is dramatic. I think we would all be way better off if the first thing we do is seek to understand before coming to a conclusion. And that's both mental and physical, and on the field and off the field, because a player, just like a coach or a employee, if life off the field isn't going well, it will show up in life on the field. If not immediately, it will come quickly. And so sometimes just understanding that and being able to even refocus the player and saying, okay, if that's happening, can we make this a 90-minute oasis, where you get away from that, or is it something that you handle in a different way? I think the more conversations, the more questions you ask as a coach or a director, the more informed and accurate your actions are going to be.
Yeah. In regards to mental health, I think, taking a break is obviously a good thing. There's a brief one that occurs from season to season in the ECNL. Talk a little bit about why you guys allowed high school play. You shut down and you allow high school play to occur when, the DA came into play, which is now gone. They did not. To me, that's a mental break to a certain extent. Yeah, they're still playing soccer, but it's a mental break from that high competitive grind. Go play with your friends, especially on the girls' side in particular. The girls are very social, which again, I think aligns so well with what you guys did for the early years. Hopefully you're still doing that today. But, why the break, and why to open the door to allow high school soccer to occur?
Well, one of the reasons when we decided, hey, we're going to continue to push our program and our platform, even though the Girls Development Academy was being launched, was the narrative at the time was, if you want to be a top level female player, if you want to be a national team player, you need to train 4 days a week, 50 weeks a year, exaggerate some of this, play no other sport after the age of 13. And that is the road to Rome. And we just, we look at the profiles of the national team players over history. It's just not true. And we also felt, just from a developmental perspective, it's not true. There's a million different ways that you can get somewhere. And there are ways that you're not going to as well, for sure. But, our role, I'd say it as far as a director or as a league. Your role, if somebody says, I want to get to A or B, your role is to tell them the most likely path to get there, knowing that every player and family is going to have different challenges, different opportunities, and different paths to get there. There is no absolute certainty that you will make it, and there is no absolute certainty that you won't make it, depending on the path that you choose, because everybody's different. And so it's the same thing with respect to high school soccer. There are players in the country that don't want to play high school soccer, and they shouldn't have an obligation to do so. But we felt that as a league, we should not make it so that they cannot play high school soccer. We should support those players and families and teams and clubs in making the decisions that they felt were best for them, in the same way that it's not our decision or our role to tell a player that at a certain age, you really shouldn't play another sport. There are going to be realities that different players at different times in their career, if they want to reach certain levels, they're going to have to focus or prioritize. But when is that? Well, it depends. It depends on the growth of the player. It depends, to be honest, on the athleticism and starting point of the player. It depends on the level of the programs they're at. It depends on the level of aspiration that they have. So ultimately, and it goes back to some of your other questions, that we felt that the best role that we play in this space is setting aspirational environments that are really rewarding and inspirational, and letting players, clubs, teams, families, coaches find their way to reach that level of performance because they want to, not because they have to or they're being mandated to.
Yeah. Well, look, we zipped through almost an hour, Christian, and it goes by so quick. I want to ask you one final question. If, in fairness, if you can even answer it briefly, what does the ECNL look like 5 years from now? Where is the organization going? What do you hope for it to be? I mean, we're looking at a youth sports market that, continues to grow and be robust. And, what does that mean for the ECNL?
Well, one of the things I said at our coach symposium 2 weeks ago, in this incredibly changing environment of youth sports, for all sorts of different reasons, is that one of our commitments is to continue to be a sport-driven business and not, as I phrased it, a business in sport. And I say that as an organization that is vision and value led, that is first looking at what does the sport need to provide a better experience for players, and then we'll build a business platform around it, because it has to be a business. It has to be profitable, or you can't continue to operate. But the decisions of where we invest money and how much we spend are first and foremost decided by our coaches, our board, who are all coaches, saying this is where we think the sport could use, a change, or this is an opportunity of something new and exciting that we can do. And we will continue to be led that way, where we chase our vision to provide the best youth sports experience in the world. And that includes the player, the coach, the referee, the family. We're going to continue to invest in that with the goal of making the sport better, making the experience better for everybody. We're going heavily now into that zone 1 area of 12 and down, not because we want to quote unquote professionalize, those young ages, or because we want kids that are getting on in cars and driving 3 hours for games. Not at all. But because we think that's an area that, as so much attention has been put in the 13 to 18-year-old space over the last 15 years, that is the area, the golden era of learning, as people would call it. That's an area where we just think there's an opportunity to make it better and make those experiences better. So I think we're going to go more and more into those spaces in terms of looking to improve the experience, improve the coaching, improve the competitive structure and opportunities. But ultimately, we will continue to chase our vision, which is pretty, I've said it a couple times on this podcast. It's pretty clear. It's pretty ambitious and grandiose. Our goal is to make the sport better and to support the people that are participating in it, and we're going to do whatever it takes to do that.
Yeah. Listen, I want to tell you, there's a lot of people inside the ecosystem when you are a sports parent, and your kid is playing. You've got coaches, you've got the organization, you have the leagues, you have the tournaments. There's a lot of different things. I want to thank you personally, because the experience that my daughter had as an ECNL player, I'm not talking about a club name. I'm talking about as an ECNL player, meant so much to her, and I commend you. And I can only hope that every parent gets to experience their kid playing in a league and going to showcases and tournaments and events under a brand like the ECNL, because to me, you guys do it really well. So thank you from my family.
Well, I really appreciate that, and we have an incredible team of people that the amount of work it takes to do what they do is incredible. The commitment and the belief in the athlete experience and the family experience that it takes to do the work they do is incredible. And then, there's a lot of good people in youth sports, and our league is a reflection of the best intentions and aspirations of the clubs within it. We are an expression of that because it's only through their support we can do it. So I'm really happy to hear that. One area we know we have to do better is engaging our alumni, like your daughter, of people who have been in the league and had great experiences in the league and now have moved on to become doctors and lawyers and business people and all sorts teachers and all sorts of other areas, because the value of sports is in taking all these lessons to help people be just better people and to inspire them to do whatever it is that they're going to do through positive experiences. So thank you to your daughter for being a part of our league, especially, she's almost one of the original generation, as we would say, because if she started in 14, 15, she was probably one of the first age groups as we expanded from 2009. So thank you for being a part of it. And thank you also for the platform here to talk about it all and for what you do here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Well, we're at the end, so we got to do rapid fire. You got to be a victim of rapid fire. So are you ready to go?
I'm good.
All right. Most understood part of ECNL.
Most understood?
Or most misunderstood part of ECNL. I'm sorry. Most misunderstood part of ECNL.
That it is a closed shop.
That
there's not a way to get into the league, that it's only limited to certain clubs.
Okay. One word parents overuse in youth sports.
Gosh, that's a tough one. Win.
Okay. One word you wish parents used more.
Love.
Oh, I like that. Sideline behavior that secretly makes you laugh.
High-fiving each other.
One rule you'd change in youth soccer tomorrow.
I'd play smaller sided in zone 1.
Biggest recruiting myth.
That schools will just find you.
One trait college coaches value more than parents realize.
Positivity.
One behavior that destroys team culture the fastest.
Selfishness.
Your favorite soccer memory as a kid.
That's funny. Actually, the memory that jumps to me as I played in a tournament in Toronto. I think it was called the Robbie, and we got absolutely obliterated in almost every game we played. I think I was under 14 at the time, but I spent 3 or 4 days with my buddies in a hotel, exploring Canada, playing soccer. We didn't care about the scores. We just had a blast, and I think that that type of memory is why soccer has such a hold on me, is because even without any of the trophies and the wins, it could provide such a great experience.
Yeah. And the final question we ask everybody on this show, what does Be Valiant mean to you?
I think I'll take valiant into valor and use that as be brave, honorable, stand up for what you believe.
Okay. Well, we did it. Thank you very much, Christian. Any final thoughts before we go?
I appreciate you for bringing us here and sharing your platform with us and sharing your experiences. And I think youth sports is an incredible thing. And all of us need to work to make sure that youth sports just keeps getting better. It keeps opening doors for players to go anywhere, and it doesn't become something that becomes overly professionalized or overly over ROI'd, I guess. I'll say it that way.
Yeah. Totally agree with you. Thank you so much for your time, Christian. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope we can do it again on another episode sometime soon.
Well, thank you, and have a great week.
Thank you, buddy. All right. If you found value in this conversation, share it with another parent, an athlete, or even a coach. For more Be Valiant shows, guest info, as well as other resources, visit playfearless.org. And as we end every show, for all the parents that are in the thick of it or just starting out, remember, you're allowed to make bold, informed decisions for your child. You're allowed to walk away from the wrong team. You're allowed to demand a better culture. Find one like the ECNL, because that's a darn good one. And most of all, you're allowed to trust your gut and lead your family the way that's right for you, and especially your kids. Until next time, be valiant, play fearless.